In this video, I will show you how to create a pantograph that nests your designs together by rows. So first you select pantograph and then define your quilt width by height. And notice my row height is now set at 25. I cannot stitch 25 inches on my machine. And on this particular design, I want the design to be about 7, 6, somewhere around there inches tall. So to make that work, you come down to rows and click rows. And notice how my row height is changing. So I'm going to go up to, well, let's just do the 8 rows. I'm going to do 3 rows. And now I want to select all of those and put a pattern in there. So I'm going to select pattern and I want to select Zyrie's Ocean. And that's a little bit too stretched out for me. So I want to add another pattern. And to do that, you just come here and you click the plus. Oh, I didn't have one of my rows highlighted. So now I need to go to that row, highlight it, and click 2. Now I'm going to go back and select all the rows again. If I do 3, that I don't like that look, so I'm going to go back to 2. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is nest these here. You can see this small area where they're not touching. And the way to do that is to select nest mode. And I just selected that. They went together perfectly. You may want to play with these different modes to see what they do. Notice that when I do, okay, the first one makes them connect. The second one lets them overflow into the sides. I don't really want that at this particular time, so I'm going to go back to this mode. Okay, but now I want them to nest vertically. So the way to do that is with all of these selected, you're going to come over and click size, and then I want my step to be at a small. This is another thing you'll want to play with. And sometimes you may nest on small and then you may have to change it to tiny, and maybe we'll do that. I'll show you that to see how that works. So once I've got that on small, then I'm going to select grow the patterns vertically. Just keep tapping that and see how they're going together. Nice and smooth. Now if I wanted to change this to, let's say, tiny, that one's really hard to see, but you can just let just minute stitches. It goes up and down and they nest together. And notice at the top and the bottom, these purple lines. For instance, the purple line at the bottom is an overflow of the design from the top. And I like that on my quilts because then I get full cover. And that you can change by selecting the fit. This is a vertical fit button. And then the vertical clipping. And see, it clipped out those purple lines. But I don't usually like that because that leaves a big fluffy part in my quilt right there. So I leave that in. And then there's another option where what this did was made it so that the design would end at the bottom of my quilt and the top. But see how it squished it all together in the middle? And again, I just don't like that option because I like to get full cover. And this is my favorite option right here, where I've got part cover at the bottom and the top. So once you've got that how you want it and you've sized it as much as you can, you select quilt as rows. Okay, and now you see the white area with the red line. That's my safe area on my quilt. And I want to pull my machine over to the top left corner of my quilt, and I put it right where the quilt starts, or maybe 1/4 of an inch to the left, and I move my machine there, and then I click the to place the pattern on the top left corner. I select that and see how it moved, and now I'm definitely within the safe area. Now these blue lines at the top, these are areas where that quilt was going to overflow. That design was going to overflow off of your quilt. And if you leave it like this, your machine is going to stop here, take some knots, make some stitches, and then it's going to slide over here, and you're going to have to press some buttons, and it's going to take some more stitches and all that. That just takes too much time for me. So since this area is going to be in my binding and possibly off of my quilt 1/4 of an inch, I want to stitch a straight line there. And to do that, you come up to Optimize and select Remove All, and watch the blue dots at the top. I never connect the first and last points, because that would make a line on your quilt from this red dot all the way over to this green dot, which we don't want. I did that once. I had to rip it out. Yikes. Okay, so see how it put a straight line there? So now you can do animate stitching, and you'll see my machine is not going to stop at these areas. It's just going to stitch a straight line, and that's what I want, because that's going to be, again, in the binding. So click OK, and now you want to move your machine over to about where it's going to start, and click Pull Bobbin. Your machine is going to pull the bobbin thread, so grab the top thread and hold it between your fingers and hold it tight and click Sew. The machine's going to move back, and at that time you'll pull the bobbin thread up with the top thread and then cut those close to the top of the quilt while this is stitching out. So now it's stitched that row, and now my machine is over in this area, and you need to tie it off. So what you do here is you press needle down, drag your machine about 10 inches away, grab this thread that's here with your finger, take your machine back to the spot, do needle down again, drag it again, and now you will have the thread you were holding plus 2 pieces of the bobbin thread. Hold all 3 of those and clip right on top of your quilt top, as close to the top as you can get. Okay, and then move your machine up to about where you see the green, or where you think it might be going to start quilting, because now what it's doing is quilting that little purple area I was telling you about. That is the filler, so you don't have a big puffy area in your quilt. And again, we've got the blue dots, which is where it's going to stop and start. We don't want those. So you click Optimize, Remove All, don't connect first and last points, and OK. So now they're gone. Now with your machine up here, you tap Pull Bobbin. So pull your bobbin thread, click Sew, grab your top thread and your bobbin thread and cut them close to your quilt top. And it's stitched pretty quickly. I wish our machines would stitch that fast. So anyway, your machine is over here. It's stitched the first row, and now obviously the machine cannot stitch the second row because there's not enough room, and you've got the bar down here. So what you want to do is mark your quilt before you move it, so that you will know where you want that next row to start. First thing you do, drag your machine over to where you think might be about the middle of your quilt, and press Move to Top Center. Your machine is going to move to right where it wants this design to start stitching. Okay, so you need to mark this area either with a friction marker, a pen, or I use a piece of painter's tape. I have about a 1-inch piece of tape that I keep on my machine. I just stick it to the front of my machine when I'm not using it. And on that tape toward the top, I have a dot that I made with a Sharpie marker. So I will lay that tape down on my quilt and make sure that that dot is directly under my needle. And then you just leave it on your quilt, press it there. Then you select Continue with Placement, move your machine all the way to the top, and now you're ready to unclamp the sides of your quilt and roll it up so that that mark you made here, or the painter's tape, is directly under your needle on the machine foot. And once you've got that there, your needle is aligned with your mark, you select this center button right here, and the design moves up. And you will see when you do this on your quilt, you'll have stitching here and here in these areas because that is row 1. And so row 2 is going to start up into row 1. Alright, so now drag your machine over to the start point, click pull bobbin, grab your top thread and hold it tight, and then when you press sew, pull your bobbin thread up and cut it close to the top of your quilt, and your machine will just start stitching. When it gets to the end, you've got the finished row message, click that, and we're going to repeat that process of grabbing your bobbin thread and pulling it to the top and cutting it. Move your machine to the middle, select move to top, center, select continue with placement. Now move your machine up to the top, roll your quilt so that your mark is directly under the needle, and select the middle button here. Okay, and so now I'm at the bottom of the quilt. Actually, I know that because of these rows, these blue lines here, because it's wanting to stitch off of my quilt. So at this point I want to optimize again and remove those blue dots. I just want some straight stitching there because this is going to be in my binding area. It's not going to be seen. Going to save you a lot of time. Bring your machine over here to where it's going to start and pull bobbin, hold your thread, click sew, pull your bobbin up, cut it close to your quilt, and let the machine stitch out this last row. And when it gets to the end, you will do finished row. Same procedure for tying off, pulling up your bobbin thread. Now you don't have to roll your quilt for this next row because this is just the filler. Okay, so, but again, we want to optimize and get rid of those blue dots because they're going to be in the binding. So we remove all and OK. And then you would pull bobbin. But before I do that, I want to show you one thing about this square here called placement. If you ever have to come back and let's say something happened, and anything could happen, and you had to come back and start with the second row. These are the 3 rows that we did. You can select these rows and it gives you a message that you'd have to place the pattern again, but you can come back and go back to a row if something happens, and you can start with that row and not have to pull anything out and re-stitch. So I'm going to have it, there's the first row, and then there's the little filler at the top. That's the second row. There's the third, and now we're at the point where we want to do the fillers at the bottom. And it actually had me move it up, but had I not clicked that, you wouldn't see this, but you will be able to figure that out if you ever have to do it. So you want to come here, do pull bobbin, sew, pull your bobbin up, cut your thread, and sew to the end. And now you're at the end of your quilt. It stitched your last row. And you will get this message because this is here for if you want to start another quilt back to back without having to pull this quilt off the machine, and that would be another lesson for another time. So you're done, and you can just go back to your original screen and go back home. I would recommend saving this pattern, any pattern. When I first started, I saved all of mine, and I created a folder. I'll show you how to do that real quick. You don't really want them in your patterns, so you don't want your quilt designs that you've saved confused with all of your designs that you pull up to stitch. So I created a file called quilt. So come over here and click new. I just called it quilt. You could call it whatever you would like to. Click OK, and notice it it created this file folder here. I click on that, and then I'm going to name this file nesting and save, so that if I ever have to come back and stitch that exact same thing again, I wouldn't have to recreate everything. And I do that a lot on Quilts of Valor quilts, because most of the ones I get are the same size, and I can call up the pattern that I used before, and it just goes so quickly, so much quickly, not having to recreate all of that.